Good morning from the High Grounds podcast. Welcome back to another morning minute meditation. In Luke chapter number 14, Jesus gives us a parable about a man who is invited to a wedding. And his instruction in the parable was that if you're invited to a wedding, not to sit yourself in the exalted place or the best seat, lest the man who invited you come and ask you to sit in a lower place. But he said, rather, if you go to the wedding, he said, sit in the lowest place, and that way, if the man comes to you, he'll invite you to come to a higher place. And the principle of the parable is, he ends with this verse. In verse number 11, he said, for whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. I think you would agree with me that we are living in a day of self-exaltation. I read this morning a story about two brothers. One brother went to college and became a Wall Street executive. Very, very wealthy man. The other brother stayed at home and he just became a farmer. And the Wall Street executive came to visit his brother on the farm one day. And he looked at him and he said, man, what's wrong with you? He said, look at what I've done. I've made a lot of money. I've invested. I've become successful in the business world. And here you are still on the farm. You've not done anything with your life. The other brother looked at him and he said, I want you to look over at the wheat field. He said, you see those stalks of wheat that are higher than all the rest of the others? His brother said, sure, I do. He said, well, the reason those stalks of wheat are higher is because in the head of that wheat, there's no grain. He said, in fact, the ones that are bowed over and that are bending, he said, the reason they're bending is because they're full of grain in the head of the wheat. And he used that as an illustration to say, just because you're exalted doesn't mean that you're successful. I think it's important that we remember in a day where so much success is defined by how people view you, it's important to remember that sometimes the people that you see the most are not the ones bearing the most fruit. Hey, I hope that'll be a little bit of a challenge to you this morning. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you soon on the Higher Grounds podcast.